One, two, ha ha ho 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 dee doo doo. Wa da da da.
Good morning, everybody. If you'd kindly take your seats, we can get the show on the road. Angela Lake Carroll, would you please sit down? So, welcome back, everybody. Welcome to anyone who's arrived this morning. It's really nice to see you all. We've got a packed programme today, which we're going to get on with straight away, but I would like to thank again our headline sponsors, 1 KBW and 29 Bedford Row, for really making this conference happen. Also, the assistant sponsors, James Hambro and Partners and Evelyn and Partners, and I'd be interested to know whether or not Cansford Laboratories get the same enthusiastic response for providing the wine this morning as they did last night, or whether we're all suffering just a little bit. But thank you very much to all of them. You'd have seen that this morning the exhibitors are here. Please take your time at tea and coffee to go and say hello to them, pick up all their pieces of plastic that you don't necessarily need and have missed during lockdown, and speak to them about the services that they provide. Again, please use Twitter to reference the conference. The hashtag is FPConf22, and please include ResConf, Res Family Law, in any tweet that you do. I'm now going to hand you over to Juliet Harvey, our chair. She's been a chair for over 2 years now, but she's been in lockdown and she's now out in the wild and she's making a tremendous burst. Thank you.
I think after that, I probably should have come running onto the stage and go, ah! My hair's wild, if nothing else, so thanks. Thanks, Dave, for that warm welcome, and for holding the reins on this, which, as Dave has just said, is our first family practice conference, live practice conference in 3 years. For the past couple of years, Dave has been hosting us all from his study, so thanks, Dave, for that. Unless you're involved with an organisation of a conference like this, I think it's impossible to truly appreciate just how much hard work goes on behind the scenes. There's been heaps of work put in by all of those, by all of you who are running workshops and have dealt with the cafe sessions. There's the staff team who pull everything together. And there's been such a great amount of support and help from a large number of you, staff and members alike. So thank you from me to all of you. And while I'm on the thanks, I'd like to thank everyone who's given up time to prepare for that workshop, whether in person or online, or who is going to present later today. And while we're on the thanks, I'm just going to put my thing there, hopefully not break this computer screen. And while we're on the thanks, I'd just like to take a moment to pass on my thanks to our headline sponsors, 1 KBW and 29 Bedford Row. We really, really appreciate your continued support. Now, I hope you all noticed these this morning. Hopefully you noticed them before you sat on them. Those chocolates have been kindly provided by Evelyn Partners, and you would have noticed a little something in your room from Evelyn Partners yesterday. So thank you very much to Evelyn. I'd also like to pay tribute to our whole DR committee, together with the amazing staff team, in getting the show back on the road after a challenging few years. Is challenging the right word? Hasn't it been awful? But the staff team and Dave deserve a massive amount of praise and our heartfelt thanks for all the work that they do. So in time-honoured fashion, Dave, I've got a little something for you. I'm not sure if you saw this a moment ago, but Dave, this is for you. That's just his breakfast. So, speaking of getting back on the road, I'd like to pay tribute to all of you for battling your way through rail strikes, traffic jams, Angela Lake Carroll for putting up with my inane conversation in the car on the way here. You've given up work commitments and anything else the world decided to throw at you in order to be here. So thank you. You truly put the Resolute into resolution. Thank Matt Bryant for that comment. Your determination to be here today is matched only by your continued determination to support families through difficult times. And I'm delighted that there are so many sessions and workshops today designed to help you do just that. It's been a genuine pleasure for us to once again host in-person event after years of pandemic-related restrictions. We're still committed to hosting events online because we know they're flexible and they allow more people to engage with us and our work. But there's always something really special about seeing members meeting in person again after a long time apart. And as somebody over there has said once, you can't hug a screen. Now, we couldn't do any of the work we do to support family professionals, to campaign for reforms to family law, and to embed our values without the work that you do, day in, day out, to live and breathe our code of practice. Next year, Resolution celebrates its 40th anniversary. Now, there'll be plenty of opportunities for you to join in the celebrations, but for now, I think it's just worth noting how far we've come in those 4 decades. From an idea that a couple of dozen matrimonial solicitors had in the early 80s to where we are now as an organisation of 6,500 professionals, no longer just solicitors, but a truly broad church organisation, all of whom are committed to supporting families, to resolving disputes, and to minimising conflict. So on behalf of the entire National Committee, I'd like to thank you for your support to Resolution, as well as your continued commitment to supporting clients and promoting our code over another testing year. I know that it's not always easy. Those of you who deal with the family courts will know what a truly desperate state they're in. Underfunded, understaffed. It's no wonder that our clients are facing increasing delays and backlogs, and all the frustration that brings. The latest statistics show that the average period from date of petition, and I mean petition because I'm talking about the old law, so from date of petition to decree absolute is now 56 weeks. That's up 7 weeks from the same time last year. It's unbelievable that it takes that long to process what is a very simple procedure. The MOJ have said these increases have been impacted by resourcing issues which have led to backlogs. No kidding. Insert your own phrase there. The government is keen, understandably, to look at what steps it can take to reduce the demand on the family court. It's telling, though, perhaps unsurprising, that mediation numbers are lower now than they ever were pre-LASPO. I know, and you know, that the information and advice that you provide to clients helps them make better, more informed decisions, and ultimately helps more of them reach agreement without resorting to the family court. And as we heard earlier yesterday, there is no data collected about the number of cases that we successfully divert away from the family courts. Now, our goal is to ensure that more members of the public get information that they need. And the message we will keep hammering home to ministers and officials is that access to early legal advice is the best way to help people find alternatives to court. It's been reported that the introduction of the mediation voucher scheme resulted in 65% of cases reaching whole or partial agreement in those children cases that were able to access the scheme. Even though 65% of those cases have been diverted away from court, we all know that our courts are still chock-a-block with children cases. We need to find a better way. Yesterday, we heard some of the brilliant ideas from our panel on what they would highlight as part of an agenda for change for the new Family Justice Minister. What came out of that was a need for early education and information, starting at a very early age in schools. There needs to be an education for separating parents, access to information hubs for resources, and support for those going through family breakdown, and demystifying processes for clients. What was clear was that clients want to be helped, and they're not overly concerned about the label we put on that help. They want problem solving, not being diverted into silos. We know that the MOJ were watching yesterday and were making notes. We will still take up the baton with that need for early legal help. Now, I don't underestimate how hard it is to be a government minister, particularly at the moment. But with the expertise and experience we have here today and within our membership, ministers could do far worse than listen to you. And we will do all we can to continue to make your voice heard in Westminster and Whitehall. One of the ways in which we'll keep Westminster informed is by launching our blueprint for a future family justice system that is fit for purpose as part of our 40th anniversary celebrations next year. And there'll be a chance for you to get involved with this. We want to hear your ideas on what you would think makes the biggest difference to your everyday practice. So often, we're asked to respond to consultations or ask what we think to X, Y, or Z. But this is our chance to set out our stall and tell policymakers the changes we know that will help more families resolve matters more constructively. Now, you know that calling for change is something resolutions become very good at. It's what we've done successfully over a sustained period of time in order to persuade government to introduce no-fault divorce, which came into effect in April of this year. It's what we're continuing to do in relation to cohabitation reform, in no small part thanks to the efforts of our Cohabitation Committee, expertly chaired by Graham Fraser, whose compelling evidence in Parliament last year led to a select committee backing our calls for change. So we will continue to stand up for you and to tell people about the amazing work that Resolution members do, and we'll help you to continue to do that work. One of the ways in which we'll be doing that in the coming weeks is in our annual Awareness Week, taking place at the end of November. For those of you who like diary dates, it's the week commencing Monday the 28th. This year, we'll be demonstrating the value to government, to the family courts, to clients and to the public of early legal and other advice, and particularly the approach taken by Resolution members. We'll raise awareness of the diverse range of options that you're talking to families about every day. It will be a great opportunity for members and firms to showcase the myriad of ways in which they help to resolve family disputes, whether that's through lawyer representation, mediation, arbitration, collaborative practice, or by members offering financial or other expert advice or therapeutic support. As Angela said yesterday, that can all be lumped together as help. That's what clients want. We want families to know that divorce and separation doesn't automatically involve courts. It's our chance to show how a Resolution member can make the difference when you separate. We know from our work with the media over the years that what really draws public attention are real-life case studies. We all have them. The father who couldn't see his child for 8 months whilst waiting for a hearing date. The family seeking an urgent order in relation to orphan children who had to wait 3 weeks for a directions hearing because although it had passed gatekeeping, the listing office was so backlogged they couldn't deal with it. Couples who've had hearings bumped due to lack of judicial availability. How many times have we heard that? How many times have we had to wait for a new listing and the uncertainty of whether that hearing will proceed? Or couples who've agreed financial matters in the run-up to a hearing, have submitted a paper order, then have to wait months for the approval of that order, potentially losing a property purchase or mortgage deal as a result of those delays. I know from my email inbox that many of you have frustrated clients who feel badly treated and very let down by the delays in the court service. Please ask your clients to consider whether they would be happy for their details to be included in a case study that we could use. Will and Matt, here's Matt, where's Will? Will's busy doing things with the media, but Will and Matt from our comms team are here today. Feel free to have a word with them if you have clients who you think would be willing to share their story, or if you're happy to speak to Will and Matt yourself about your frustration and your experiences that you encounter day in, day out when dealing with the courts. You can either have a word with them today or you can email them once you're back in the office. Because it's only by highlighting these issues and showing the reality of the difficulties that exist within the court system that together we can help deliver the message that court, in the majority of cases, should be the last resort, not the first choice. It goes without saying that case studies from clients who've resolved family cases away from the court arena are most welcome. These can really help to inform clients that doing it the resolution way truly is a better way. Now, there'll be more information in your inboxes soon detailing how you can get involved with that week of activity. And if you've got any events planned, whether in your firm, your practice group, or in your region, please let Res HQ know. We'll feature as many of those events as we can on Twitter and in our roundups at the end of the week. In highlighting the ways in which you help couples resolve matters, it will give us an opportunity to talk about something we'll be hearing from Angela and Tris later today, Resolution Together. You may have noticed that there have been some emails dropping into your inbox this week about Resolution Together, and this is a new way for lawyers to work with and advise couples jointly, including providing appropriate legal advice for those members and clients who want to work in that way. Now, we know it won't be right for everyone. Some clients won't want to take that route. Some of you may not want to work in that way. And we'll continue to support all our members, however they choose to work. But this is another approach that will help minimise conflict between separating families. It's another way to help. And it's one of the many ways in which we will continue to work with you and for you. Now, I won't steal Angela and Tris's thunder by saying too much about it now, because they're way better equipped than I am, for one thing. But I'm really proud that Resolution is continuing in the pioneering spirit on which it was formed nearly 40 years ago. So, as we head towards our 40th anniversary, let's be proud of what we've achieved together so far. And let's continue to work together as we shape the next 40 years for our members, your clients, and their families. Let's be proud of our past, and I'd invite all of you to be part of our future. Thank you all so much, and I really hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliet, and I do echo our thanks to all the work that members do in committees, whether it's regional subcommittees around the country, and just the work you do in your organisations. It's now my great privilege to introduce Andrew McFarland, the President of the Family Division. I'm not going to spend any time introducing him because you know him well, and he's been a great friend to Resolution over the years. And so over to Sir Andrew. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm not sure what the timetable is. I think I was due to be finishing speaking. Mood. Last night, I went to what was a very good occasion, the opening of new offices for the Family Rights Group, which, as you know, has been in existence for about 50 years now, focusing on children within families, within the family justice system. And it was a good occasion. The offices are good, and all the staff were there, and there's a wide range of professional backgrounds represented amongst the staff. But the organisers had chosen to focus on the contribution made by 4 women who'd been integral members of the team at the Family Rights Group over the years, but each of whom had died tragically in the middle of their life during their time working there. And indeed, the new facilities there, the 4 main rooms, each of those 4 rooms is named after one of the women. They're Alison Richards, Bridget Linley, Kim Bryan and Sue Murray. And so amongst the staff who were there to be jolly and look at the opening of the new building, there were the family members of each of those 4 women. So it was a time for them to reflect. And much of this little address I gave and the address that Cathy Ashley gave was to think about the women and how they'd lived their professional life, what they had done, the difference they made to the organisation, the support that they'd had from their families. And that was, I thought, a really good thing to do. It enabled the families at a time well after they've got over their immediate grief to hear the championing of their loved ones at a time when they could take it in, but also the younger members of the team who did not know these women and who were impressive. I talked to a lot of the team, and there's a good crew there. And just to connect and touch ground with what their forebears had done and what they were now going to do in this swanky new building, I thought was a really good exercise. And it made me think, indeed I said, what are we doing this for? Why are we family lawyers? Why are you in the conference today family lawyers? What's it all about? And I think quite often in the busy life of being a solicitor in a busy practice, we don't get the chance to think about that at all. And what are you normally doing at 9:27 on a Friday morning? Not sitting back listening to an old man talking in this way. But it's quite good to reflect. It's good for you, it's good for your team, it's good for the younger people in the team, and it's good to connect with why we are family lawyers. And I think, and I've said this before, I'm not going to go on about it, but I think family law is different from other areas of legal endeavour. It's more of a vocation than simply a career. We're doing it because we, on top of the interests we have in being good lawyers and solving problems for clients, we've got an interest. We're hooked, as it were, on the emotional side of matters and helping and supporting people at a very difficult time in their lives. And that's really important. It's also important to recognize that's what everybody does. Your opponents, to use the old language, in any case, will be similarly motivated to you. And clearly you want to get the best result for your client, but so do they. But there's a bigger human interest, I think, in what we do. And so it is good for you to come together at a conference like this and to be members of an organization like Resolution. It's good, as I'm sure you are finding after these 2.5 years, to be able to come together and simply spend time with each other and think about the wider things, to respect each other and to have an interest in each other. And to think about what we do, and more importantly, how we do it within our professional lives. And to think what contribution, thinking of these 4 impressive women, and the contribution they made, what contribution are you making to the wider community of family law? What's it all about? What are you going to do that might make a difference? And that leads me on as part of a continuing reflection. I gave the John Cornwall Memorial Lecture last week to the Family Mediators Association conference. And John Cornwall, as you will know, founded the firm Dawson Cornwall, and then within 4 or 5 years was one of the key founders of the Solicitors Family Law Association, which became Resolution. And then 5 or 6 years later, he founded the Family Mediators Association. And to do one of those things in your career would be impressive. To do all three in the compass of about 15 years is awesome, I think. And that chimes with really reflecting back a question to each of you. What are you doing to go the extra mile to move matters on in family law, in your firm, amongst your colleagues? And also, more generally, what are you doing to connect and enhance the community of family lawyers? Because I do think we need to be connected in a way that other forms of lawyers don't necessarily require. And it's very good for that to happen. So well done for being at the Resolution Conference, and well done for all you do in your practice. Now, having mentioned the John Cornwall Memorial Lecture, and move now down to more immediate matters, those of you who've seen it will know that I used it as an opportunity 12 months on from the address I gave to a conference in Jersey, all about private children family law, which in Jersey attempted to set an agenda to push government, as it has to be, to take action, to provide resources, facilities, education, information, whatever you wish to call it, to support separating couples, both in relation to money and children, in a way that enables them to resolve any disputes they have without even thinking of coming to court. And I used the Jersey speech to flag up the Family Solutions Group report, What About Me? Well, you know all that. And the speech I gave last week was in part to say, well, what's happened in 12 months? What, Macfarlane, have you achieved? And someone rushing past would think, well, not much. But I took the time to identify about 12 changes that are taking place, or signs of change to indicate that the tectonic plates are indeed moving. And I think it's no secret that the MOJ under Dominic Raab took this up, heard what I and others were saying, and focused on this work. And I think there was some hope that there may have been some movement in government, but events take place, and Boris Johnson's administration fell, and nothing had been published by that stage. So we now look to the new administration and hope that they too will engage in this issue. And it's important for us, you, me, to keep flagging this up. So I'm not going to say now what I said in the lecture last week, but if you're interested, you'll see, I hope, that there are movements taking place. One key thing that has happened, and I particularly championed this in what I said last week, was the move to the one lawyer, two clients model, exemplified by the divorce surgery, by one or two firms. Withers, Joe O'Sullivan and others have already established their own model of that way of working. And now Resolution Together is to be launched. I am very pleased about this development. It seems to me that for the right case, the right couple, this is a very helpful and sensible and in terms of the financial outlay, moderated and contained way of progressing. I ventured, and of course I'm a judge and I can't make statements about policy change other than to hint and be vague, but I mentioned in my address last week that if it's a good thing to provide legal aid for mediation, it might be a good thing to think of providing legal aid for the one lawyer, two client model. And that's as far as I can go, I think, certainly publicly, but it's something that Resolution might want to look at, as well as developing it for the use of the wider community. In the 2 or 3 minutes I've got left, there's one or two topics just to bring you up to date. We're still in the middle of the reform programme, which is the movement of the entire court system, not just family, from being paper-based to being entirely digital. And it is not without problems, as you will know. A problem that you have all had is the progress of work which is still paper-based and travels through, no matter where you are in the country, through the court office at Bury St Edmunds. And there have been real problems there. And I hear about that on a weekly basis and monitor it. The current information is that it's now significantly better than it was, and it's moving in the right direction. They've having reduced the staff level there, they've put more staff back in, and they're onto it. But you've been good at keeping me informed about that, and I hope you will continue to do so. At the other end of the process, the digital end, the part that I suspect most of you have encountered will be the financial remedy contested case portal. And again, that's not been without problems. I meet once a fortnight with representatives of Resolution, the ALC, the Law Society Family Law Committee, and the FLBA. And I'm aware that a principal problem is that it's difficult for respondents to proceedings to get onto the system and to see the paperwork, or all the paperwork, well, it's not paper, but the material on there. And that's clearly a major issue. I think it's also difficult for the bar to log on at a timely stage. And those are two major structural matters that need to be resolved. That the question I'm facing is whether to, these awful words, whether to mandate the use of the financial remedies portal so that everybody has to use it across the country at all the courts from a particular date. I think we're not there yet. I'll be interested in whatever feedback you can give to Juliet and others who can talk to me during your conference. But my feel is that once we get these two bigger problems solved, it's good enough. You know, that's not a great ambition, isn't it? But it's good enough to roll out. And then the experiences with all these programs is they do improve once everyone gets used to using them, and they settle down. Today, I'm also attending the annual meeting of all of the Financial Remedies Court leadership judges. And I guess you'd like to be a fly on the wall at that meeting. And plainly, I'm going to be guided a lot by what they say as to how it's working at their end of the telescope. So I'm not rushing to mandate it, but it's often helpful if we're nearly there to mandate it, because then everybody joins in, and you're not running two systems, which is difficult. Backlogs in the court system remain stubborn. We make some progress, but it's stubborn. My mantra, make every hearing count, is one that I promote whenever I can. And I hope that in relation to public law, I will lead a major initiative in the autumn to really tighten things up and try to reconnect with the PLO. But we wait to see. We're waiting for some more information that was garnered over the summer by what was called a deep dive at some key courts to try and work out just why there are so many adjournments in these cases. This is not a happy situation for any of us to be in, and you have my sympathy, and I'm empathetic to the difficulties. Nobody likes being in this position. I do see that we will get through this reform phase and it will settle down. It's a no-brainer that you want to have a digital system in the modern world. It's I used to go and visit courts, and the file upon file will be being wheeled around the office in a Sainsbury's trolley. I mean, it's just not a proper system at all. So we've got to get there. It'll settle down, but it's our lot, you, me, everyone else, to be stuck in the middle of it at the moment. So hang on in there is my plea to you, and keep HMCTS at it. Keep feeding back the problems, because it's only by them hearing what's not working that they can address it. And they do listen. They're then, they don't want to be in this position any more than us. They're on side, but they're hampered by the technical difficulties. Two other topics just to lob in your direction. there is, as you will know, quite a debate going on about whether experts, in inverted commas, should be instructed at all in cases where parental alienation is asserted. And if an expert is instructed, do courts always choose suitably qualified and regulated experts or not? And if not, should there be some direction about the future choice of experts in such cases? Well, we've identified 2 cases that have come up to the High Court on appeal, and I'm due to hear those on the, I think, the 26th of October. And I won't give judgment on the 26th of October, but that issue is now in the system and going to be looked at in that way. The second topic is the use of language. Those of you who have noted, maybe even watched, because it's available online, the Bridget Lindley Memorial Lecture that Helen Adam gave in May, I think it was, will know that she really champions the idea that we don't use the right language in family proceedings, whether it's money or children, and the way we talk about applicant and respondent, Kramer v. Kramer, custody battle. We don't say custody, but fight. We use opponent, et cetera, maximizes the feeling that it is a gladiatorial or a contest between the couple, when really we want to be focusing on the issues and lowering the temperature. Well, Helen led a small group at my request to draw up a report on this topic, the use of language. And it's really good. I've read it, and it's very thoughtful. It's not just a list of words. It goes into the background of why, effect, and what we could do. And in fact, just now, I asked Helen when it was going to be published on the website. And there's been a bit of a delay, but it should be up on the Family Solutions Group website, I think, during next week. It's not something that I can deal with by a practice direction. From the 4th of October, you will now say this when you're describing a case and not that. It's a culture change. We've got to absorb this by osmosis and all agree, if we do agree, to try and move in the same direction. So it's a slower burning thing, but it's one that I'm very keen on. I think it is part of a change of culture away from going to court to fight things out, which is part of why I think the volume of certainly litigants in person coming for private law proceedings is so high. So that's the end of my slot, I think. I'm sorry I'm not with you. I did enjoy coming to the conference that you had in Birmingham in May. And in the time I was there, I met a lot of people, and I do really enjoy meeting people, particularly people I don't know, as well as old chums who are no doubt there. So I hope at your next conference I'll be there in the flesh. But I'll sign off now and wish you well, and leave you with the thought I started with, that we've only got one chance to make a contribution to the way we work, how we respect each other and are interested in each other. And I think you've taken a step in that direction and do day in, day out anyway as resolution members. But it's important to reflect on that side of what we do as much as the busyness of what normally happens at 9:43 on a Friday morning. Have fun. Thank you very much. I'll sign off.
Well, there you have it, the President encapsulating what have you done today to make you feel proud. I have to say, I sit in and around London occasionally at the Central Family Court. If you go onto the portal, you will be lucky if there is a Form A. The idea that we can go digital from January, as I think is Honour Judge Hess's suggesting, is just not realistic at all, I don't think. Anyway, thank you very much to the President. And now it's the Henry Brown Lecture, our annual event, and I'm delighted that Angela Lake Cowell and Tris Harvey will be here to shine some light on Resolution Together. It's a new practice model which allows couples to work jointly with one lawyer on their separation. Together with other members of the Resolution Future Practice Group, Angela and Tris have been instrumental in developing this new way of working. Angela is really the go-to person for all things dispute resolution, and she is at the heart of everything that resolution does. Tris is a barrister at QEB and a member of the Dispute Resolution Committee, but all his work now is dispute resolution, which is quite a remarkable achievement. He's someone that I use regularly on early neutral evaluations and as an arbitrator, and is extremely good. But he made one mistake. He sat next to me last night at dinner, and he said that Nottingham University was his alma mater, where he was there only a few years ago, and he met his wife there, and he's coming up for the anniversary of him meeting his wife, which was Halloween, where he says he went out in a witch's outfit with some very lurid fluorescent tights, and somehow got into an altercation with a skeleton, which he didn't elaborate on, but somehow his wife fell in love with him that night, and they've been together since. So I'd like to call to the stage both Tris and Angela. Thank you very much indeed.
Conference. Microphone's now turned on. Almost 10 years since I attended my first Future Practice Conference, then DR conference. I'd recently qualified as a mediator and was keen to meet and get to know some of my new DR colleagues. At that conference, I barely knew anyone. I arrived up at the campus, at the Nottingham University campus, registered, and I took my place for the opening debate. The subject, can one lawyer advise two clients? The debate was, how can I put it? Well, let's say lively. If I wasn't already a little bit terrified, when I arrived, I certainly was by the time the debate had finished. However, what quickly became apparent to me, both at that conference and also those I attended that followed, was that while delegates sometimes differed in terms of their views on various things, they were fundamentally united in a desire to help couples separate with dignity and in a way that minimize conflict. I was inspired then to be surrounded by colleagues who shared that common purpose, and I remain inspired 10 or so years later, attending this conference today. It is then a privilege to be asked to speak today about Resolution Together with Angela, who has done so much to develop it, and also to hear the president of the family division give his endorsement to it in his opening remarks this morning. 2022 is a landmark moment for the family justice system as the Divorce, Dissolution and Separation Act comes into force after years of tireless lobbying by Resolution members. It seems fitting then that in that same year, Resolution launches an approach to practice which reflects that statutory change and enables separating couples to receive advice together in the same room. In the words of Tim Dutton QC, who was instrumental in advising on the regulatory aspects of the scheme, it's an idea whose time has come. It's a way of working that some will readily embrace. However, without any doubt at all, there will be those who are worried about it. And those concerns may relate to the approach itself. For example, the worries about working within regulation, dealing with issues in relation to conflicts. Or people may be worried about themselves individually, what it means for them. Might it take away work from the area in which they practice? So, with all of that in mind, this session today is effectively in two parts. For the first 15 or 20 minutes or so, Angela is going to tell us a little about what Resolution Together is and how it came into being. And then for the second part, what we're going to do is answer any questions, or at least we're going to try to answer any questions that you may have about the scheme and address any worries or concerns. We hope that you'll forgive us, consequently, for it being a largely unscripted session this morning. But we're hoping that by keeping our fingers crossed, that by keeping it as discursive and as interactive as possible, it will be as interesting and helpful a session as it can be. So if you have any questions, please do. I think the Twitter wall will be up at some point, I think, so please do tweet any comments or questions that you might have. And of course, in the old-fashioned way, you can simply raise your hand and we'll come to you. Angela, is there anything that I haven't said by way of introduction that you think I ought to have done?
Perfect. Thank you very much, Tris.
Okay. In which case then, what I'm going to begin by asking is simply asking Angela, if you wouldn't mind, just to say a little bit about, in a nutshell, really, what Resolution Together is, and then we'll perhaps come back to the approach in a little bit more detail.
Thank you. I think it's important that we outline this very clearly as an area of practice. It will be, we think, a part of everyday practice for family law specialists in the future. It isn't another process. It will not be another silo. We believe it will be possible for members, whether they are lawyers, financial advisors, or even therapeutic professionals, to be the central professional of client choice, to be able to bring in the expertise that is needed as the case travels towards a conclusion. The one thing that was very important to Resolution as an organisation, particularly to the Future Practice Group, was that whatever we built had to operate within current regulation. The scheme, as we put it together, we believe, does just that, and I'm very pleased to say that the SRA agree with us. So we have done what we can to talk to colleagues in the SRA. We've been talking to the FLBA. We will hope to be hearing shortly from the Bar Standards Board. We've included Silex, and we've made sure that we've had discussions which have also involved our financial advisors and family therapeutic professionals. So we hope that what we've created, therefore, is something which will slot in to everyday practice, but which is a complete package. It has principles, standards, and guidelines. It sets out in flowcharts and in summary exactly how the scheme works. It will provide those who wish to offer it with the template documents that they need. It will mean that you can work, when appropriate, with two clients together, and we hope it is very much an integrated model. That is, we hope that if you are that single professional, you will be talking with those clients about designing what it is they need to reach the conclusion they hope for. That might be by using mediation, by having an early neutral evaluation, by arbitrating, by having support from a therapeutic professional. Whatever it is, that those clients would like in the design of how they get from first meeting their single professional to the conclusion of the matter that they have to sort out. So it is a big departure, and we do realise it's very different for some of you. We also know we have members who are already operating in similar ways. And we hope that this brings some recognition of the fact that this is possible to do, and we should be doing it as part of practice for people who separate, because it's important that they are able to access early advice, that where they really want to settle things, to sort things out without rancour and with dignity, we should be aiding them to do that. And that will keep them a very long way away from the overburdened courts, we hope. So that, in a nutshell, I think outlines it. I hope I haven't forgotten anything.
No, Angela, thank you very much. At the launch of Resolution Together, you spoke about having your eye on the horizon and the work you've done on the family justice briefings. So before we come to the scheme in a little bit more detail, and so this is something you've spoken about at length, and certainly at this conference, I think, a few years ago, but would you mind just saying something about the context, perhaps the wider changes in the family justice system which have led us to this point?
Yeah. Those of you who've read the family justice briefing or who listen to me rabbit endlessly on about this will know I have the privilege of being able to take time to look across the horizon to see what may be coming. I know that all of you, because you are so busy supporting clients, helping them to reach conclusions, dealing with everyday practice, that it's really hard to lift your eyes from the desk and see what's coming. And sometimes I know that therefore you get hit square on by something perhaps you didn't see. I think I have been seeing the context of family justice changing now for well over a decade. Since the start of the reforms in 2011, with the Family Justice Review, that has continued to roll forward with increasing speed and has been added to by disruptive technologies, which are, as you've heard the President say today, we can't escape technology, and of course we have to have a digital system. Then we had a worldwide pandemic, and we all had to learn how to do things differently, and indeed clients want to do things differently. Some of you will know that this week the Royal Society Gazette has reported a 22% rise in divorce applications, the biggest rise in over a decade. Now, probably 20 years ago we'd all be thinking, oh wow, we're going to be really busy. But you see now, that 22% rise will be people who are doing it for themselves online. But there'll be people who will hit a point where they haven't sorted out their money, or they're having arguments about their children, and they will need some help, and we have to be ready to stand there for them and with them. And the difficulty is, and my fear is that as practitioners we're lagging behind the reforms that are happening and which are moving at such speed. If people can't find the help they need, two things happen. One is they go to court, because they end up there by default, because they don't know where else they can go. There's not enough information about where else they can go, because we don't sell ourselves very well. And the other thing is that they can either do nothing and build up all those problems about their money and for their children, or they can just get into the most horrendous family situations, which may take generations to resolve. So I think it's really important in looking at these reforms to see what people will need. And what people will need are services that they understand, that are integrated, that help them not just with that bit, but all of it. because they struggle. People struggle. You will know yourselves what it's like if you go somewhere and you want to sort something out and someone says to you, well, I can do that bit, but you have to go over there to do that bit. Or have you thought about going over there? Because they may be able to help you. Or there's somebody called, unpronounceable, ununderstandable name, they may be able to help you. We're talking about people who are making a distress purchase. They don't want to be there. They don't want to meet us. They don't want any of these processes. They're unhappy. They're angry. They just want to sort it out. And they don't want to pay a lot of money for it. And you know what? Consumers are now very powerful. If you don't offer what they want, they'll go and find it somewhere else. And that's the third thing that will happen. If we do not respond, the new professionals who are rising will. They're better at marketing than we are. They're better at listening to people than we are. Some of them will do a really good job, and a lot of them won't. So 40 years is a long time for Resolution to be building the level of expertise that it has. Are you willing to hand that over to a lot of other people who haven't spent 40 years thinking about what they could offer and how they offer it and how to be safe in doing so? Because I think, that's really, in the evolution we're looking at, that's where we are. We've also got to stop spending our time arguing whose process is better. They all have application. We have to work together, not apart. These are not commodities that we sell in a competing manner, because that will not work. We'll be so busy arguing about whether one is better than another that we'll not see our client groups exiting to go somewhere else. So I'm sorry it's hard words, but that is the evolution. And yes, of course, we're beginning to see things running very close together. There aren't a lot of gaps between what I might offer as a mediator or a family consultant or as an arbitrator or as an advisor. Of course there aren't. And one day, perhaps, Resolution will consist of a lot of family justice experts who can do all of it. That's where I'd like to see it going. I think all of us need all of the skills.
Angela, thank you. On your tables, you have some QR codes, and what those should take you to, at least I hope that's what they're for, is the suite of documents that's been released this week. A lot of work has gone into those documents, fairly unapologetic for the length of them. They provide real detail. And there are a number of documents there. There's standards documents, frequently asked questions. There are other documents that will help you, help people in practice. You'll take time to read them. What I'm going to ask Angela to do now, which is probably almost an impossible task, but is to say something a little bit about how Resolution Together works, an overview really of what it might look like, recognising that it is absolutely an approach to practice as opposed to another silo. Angela, could you say a few words about that?
When you have opportunity to read the principles, standards and guidance document, you will see that it will take you through an introduction to the scheme, looking at who it is suitable for, which is very important, because the distinguishing feature about Resolution Together, in a way, is that it doesn't fit into dispute resolution. It is not a dispute resolution approach, because a key feature is that we have to be sure in talking to people about working in this way that they do not have a conflict of interest, as we would understand it in law. We know, all of us in this room know particularly, that people may well have a conflict of an emotional kind. They may be in arguments, but you will also know, because all of you, nearly all of you, have done either collaborative or mediation training, and you will know what underpins those sort of conflicts. It may be a lack of data, a difference of opinion between them, a lack of understanding, an emotional component, any of those things, which makes it different from a conflict of interest in law. But you will see we've laid out those groups that we think it's either suitable for, and particularly and importantly, those individuals for whom it is not suitable. And this is really important. And I think it's worth Tris and I saying, this, because this isn't another silo and it's not a bandwagon, we don't want people to be offering this on the basis of, this is the only thing I'm going to offer you. We want you, as I said yesterday, we want all of you to be listening first, always, to see what might be appropriate. We know there is a growing demand from separating couples to be able to work with a single professional. So we appreciate that there is an increasing number of people contacting professionals to say, can we come and talk to you together? And especially lawyers. And we know that has been really difficult for you in the past because you're not sure what you should do. And I've heard everything from, well, I say you can come, but could you sit at the back of the room and pretend you're not there? To, well, I will give some advice to your partner and you'll hear it, but you can't use it. Now, I mean, for goodness sake, if I was a consumer, I'd be thinking, what is this person on about? So we wanted to create a system where you could have those two people in your room. You could be confident about having those two people in your room, and you would be able to talk with them, but most importantly, listen first, to help them make decisions about what, how, and who. So it's really important that we're very clear about suitability, and that is set out in the Principles and Standards document. We've also placed the legal and regulatory principles very early in this document. I do have to just give our thanks again to Timothy Dutton, who has just been absolutely amazing in the assistance and advice he's given us, and what's more, has been one of the few QCs I've worked with who is an absolute joy. So, and Tim has helped us to set out here how this fits within the regulatory code, whether it's with the SRA, bar standards, Silex. It is all there. This is of particular importance for you if you are a lawyer of any flavour, because you need to understand carefully what this commits you to in terms of your regulatory responsibilities as a lawyer. I can assure you that the SRA, the FLBA, and we hope the Bar Standards Board are doing so at the moment, have crawled over this. So it's been looked at very carefully. You will then note we've had to add into this, and it's really important that we do, safeguarding and protection from harm, because one of the areas, those of you who know me, know I worry about a great deal, is safeguarding, and particularly for people in abusive relationships, of which there are many. So quite a part of what will be offered as part of Resolution Together is safety. There will be a responsibility on all of us, if we're working with couples who are using a Resolution Together service, to ensure their safety and their security and that of their children. So we make no apology for that. We think it's central to the scheme. It certainly will be very much in evidence, because part of the scheme is that you must make a full and appropriate assessment of each individual before you contract together for Resolution Together. We've covered confidentiality and privilege, again, within regulations, so that everyone is very clear about that. And then we've talked about full and appropriate disclosure, because when people are dealing with financial matters as part of this service, One of the things that they must contract together and with you to do is to give full and appropriate disclosure in an open manner, and they must understand that's what has to happen. We've then gone on to talk about the level of advice giving and the fact that in fact you are there to facilitate the couple negotiation. You are not the negotiator as that single professional. You are there to aid negotiation between the two people using the service. Advice giving is very important because part of this is that people need advice in order to make decisions, and you will be in a position to be able to give that, and we set out how that operates, whether it's jointly beneficial advice or whether it's advice in other areas. It's really important that they have the advice they need and that they know that they are free to seek such advice from other professionals, including other lawyers, at any time, because it's important that they know and understand that they can do that. You can also agree with the couple that she will be the solicitor of record for the filing of any draft consent order, but full information is given about when that might be appropriate and when it would not be in the package of materials that we've put together. If you look at the retainer and agreement, some of you will know that we've been busily trying to work towards what we've been calling the universal agreement. We're getting closer. For Resolution Together, it's very important that there is a very clear retainer. So people using this service have both a retainer and an agreement which will look very familiar to you, because it's one of the suite of documents that fits with the participation agreement and with the agreement to mediate. I am very proud to say they are written in clear English. We hope they do not use words that people do not understand. And it was very interesting for Tim, I think, because he had to deal with the fact that we were saying, no, not that phrase. You cannot use that word, because obviously Tim works in an area which is deeply technical and uses a lot of legal language. So I think we've learned things from each other. And I think he was very amused that we were so committed to clear English, but we hope the retainer and agreement is clear and written in clear language. It may look a bit clunky to start with. We all have to start somewhere. I hope that we will be able to review these documents as we get into practice using this service and as we learn more about what people need from us. What we hope we've given you is a complete package in order for you to operate in this way if you wish. I think we should also say, and be very clear, there is no bar to any member of this organisation offering a one lawyer, two client service if they wish. That is entirely your choice. What we've done is the legwork for those of you who'd like to use a package available through Resolution.
Angela, thank you. The only thing I was going to add to all of that was that Angela's touched on the regulatory position, questions of safeguarding. The way that will work in practice, what probably won't come as a great surprise to anyone, is that the individual meetings will be an essential part of the approach. So that before offering advice to the couple together, you'd have to have the individual meetings with them to do that screening and make sure that you're going to be within the regulatory framework and that they're not in conflict in law. And of course, then that's something that you continue to review as you move forward. It isn't something that happens at one moment in time. Obviously, it'll be a continuing obligation. So that, in a nutshell, is what Resolution Together is all about. And we started a little bit late, so we've got a little bit less time than we anticipated. And we will touch on training insofar as it doesn't come as a question. But I wonder whether now would be a good moment to turn to you and to see if there are any questions. And I wonder whether we can just, if it's possible, Matt, to have the Twitter wall back up again, so I can then perhaps turn back and see what's up there. Yes. We've got a microphone coming, I think, Thanks, Ali.
And there's also Mark behind. Justin.
Thank you very much. I'm Justin Lees from Chichester in West Sussex. I'm a very pro Angela Lake Carroll person, having trained me as a mediator and assessed my mediation assignment. Anything that Angela Lake Carroll says and suggests, I'm very open to. I looked at the webinar that Adele chaired and that Tristan and Angela participated in. Yesterday I received my email with the documentation. Thank you very much in respect to that. I haven't had a chance of looking through that yet because of my attendance at this conference. But I'm very open-minded to this initiative. But I do have some reservations about it. And I think at this precise moment in time, they fall into three categories. The first one is insurance. What I'm concerned about, obviously, is because we're all required as family lawyers, can't speak for, obviously, other resolution members, but for us lawyers, we are required to have professional indemnity insurance. And I want to make sure that, obviously, if I take advantage of this initiative, and I understand, Angela, this is not, obviously, for everybody. It is not compulsory. It's another way of working, avoiding the word option or process. It's another way of working, and we all have a choice, obviously, whether we in fact wish to pursue that or recommend to our clients that they pursue it. But those of us, obviously, who might do, I'm concerned, obviously, that we make sure that our insurance is not prejudiced by us.
May I answer that point, Justin? Because it's really important. And in fact, part of the scheme says very clearly you must have appropriate professional indemnity insurance. Now, there was a lot of discussion and debate by the Future Practice Group with Tim Dutton, with others, about the insurance position. I think we need to be clear here, because this operates within current regulation, your insurance is not disturbed, because it's no change, as long as you continue to work within regulation. Now, I don't know whether we have any insurers with us today, and I really wouldn't want to upset them at all. But our concern was, when you approach insurers, if what they hear you say is, ooh, we're a bit worried about this, they think, whoa, better revisit the premiums, might have to go up. So we feel that what we are presenting to any insurer is this. This is no change. This is within current regulation. We suggest that any member who is offering this service should, as a matter of courtesy, inform their insurer, just as you do when you become a mediator. We've also produced some information for COLPs, because we know that COLPs, or generally those who have a concern about regulatory and standards in practices, will have a worry. So part of the package is also information for them, to assist you when you have those conversations. And in doing what we've done, we are hoping, therefore, that this will not cause issues. We would want to hear from you immediately if you hear from your insurer that they have a problem with it. We would like to avoid getting into discussions with the key syndicates, because I think they'll see it as dollar signs. So that's where we are. We hope that helps, but please do tell us if it doesn't work.
Thank you, Angela. So I'm taking from that, obviously, at the moment we haven't had a definitive indication from any particular insurer that this is okay so far as they're concerned. No. But you recommend, obviously, that if we have concerns about that, we obviously contact our individual insurers, advise them, obviously, that we are participating in this initiative, and for confirmation, obviously, that we are covered still by our insurance policy.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's probably worth just reminding everyone that at the launch, Tim dealt with this precise question, and his answer was exactly as Angela's was, that in principle, we're working within regulation. There really, as a matter of principle, shouldn't be an issue with insurers.
Tristan, the reason why I asked that question is obviously having seen that presentation, Tim didn't actually specifically confirm that the insurance industry had AOK'd it.
Yes.
He said there was no reason, obviously, why the insurance company should not, but obviously, as Angela's confirmed, to consult our own insurers just to be absolutely certain that we are obviously still on cover.
It's also really difficult just because the market now, it's not limited to 2 or 3 insurers. There are a myriad insurers offering professional indemnity insurance, and that would mean the only way that we could have any kind of meaningful discussion would be to talk to the syndicates. If we alert the syndicates and they think they can make some more money, that will, trickle down to all of the insurers. So it does sound a bit cat and mouse. I really believe that this is not an issue, but I would want to hear from anybody who thinks it is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Justin, forgive me, just because I'm told we've only got 10 minutes, would you mind just if we perhaps turn to other people who've got questions? But Andrew and I will be here, so if anyone's got any questions that we don't deal with now, please do come and talk to us. We're keen to have feedback and hear from all of you. I think Mark had a question behind, is that? And then we'll come back.
Just a quick one. I need to understand this better, but as a mediator thinking about doing this, if you were working in the one advisor, 2 client model and discussing what it was they wanted to do, and if they said they wanted to do mediation and you are a mediator, can you then simply segue into doing mediation?
Thank you, Mark. That is the perfect segue for me. We all need, whatever we offer, to think about our first meetings. Because at the moment, what we tend to do, I think, a lot of us, is that we have a first meeting in which we try to lay out all the options, and we do a little bit of pushing towards the option that we like best. And we're commonly faced with a client who just seems even more confused, not surprisingly, because if they've just heard that menu of options, it's a bit like Waitrose. Waitrose used to stock 38 varieties of marmalade. They now don't, because what we know from choice architecture and retail science is that if you face people with too many choices, they can't make a choice at all, and they don't buy the marmalade. Whereas if you limit it, that's better. So, as I said yesterday, I would like us to reach a stage where what our members do is listen. Listen really carefully. Get a sense of what's happening for those 2 clients. What's most important for them? What have they got to sort out? Who are they? And what are the services that might help them best? And we stop laying out all these options. We know we're clever. They know we're clever. That's why they're in our room. They know we're experts. We do not need to just deliver all of this stuff about things they can't understand. We need to talk to them in language they understand because they're distressed. And we need to say, having heard what you've said, it sounds to me as though it might be helpful for you too. And then you're making choices with them about how you would help them. At that point, you may decide that mediation might be the best help. They may have come to you specifically to say, I'd like you to act as a single professional. If it's not going to be appropriate, then you could talk to them about how else they could be helped. Now, if you're a mediator, of course, you can offer them another means of dealing with things. However, wherever you're deciding to work, you are going to have to think about the regulation around it. So, in the frequently asked questions, you will see you can't change hats if you're going to breach regulation into what you're doing. I think that's obvious because we're professionals, we need to know that. But what I think we all have to do is to stop giving options meetings. Please, just listen to people. Because if you look at some of the research that's come out recently, we score really highly, particularly lawyers, for the service we give to clients. But what else did they say, even though it's quite a high score? They said, we're cold and unfeeling, and we talk a language they don't understand. Now, if we can get 86% satisfaction rates, and when we're cold and unfeeling and don't talk their language, just think what we could do if we did talk their language and we did listen and we were able to help them in a range of ways. And if where we couldn't directly help them, we knew someone who we could bring in. Please join up. Please bring in colleagues. Please act in an integrated way, because those are the services people need. If you buy a service, if someone says to you, oh, and would you like that bit? You're thinking, wow, that's really good. So this is what we have to do. So thank you, Mark. Perfect question.
I think we've got time perhaps for one more. And if it doesn't cover training, then we will deal with that as we finish. Any other questions? Yes. You've got a microphone down the front, please.
Here, Will.
Hi, Peter Martin. It may be that you're about to deal with it, in which case I'm giving you another good segue. Within, as a mediator, as well as a solicitor, one is very used to, within mediation, clients trying to rather get you more on their side and to have private and confidential chats with you, which you can't have, in order to try to get their way rather than anything else, even when they're trying to sort things out amicably. Is there going to be training for solicitors who aren't used to dealing with that sort of situation, trying to deal with that within the resolution together?
Absolutely. And yes, another lovely segue. Thank you so much. There isn't going to be training because it's not a badge. It's not a, this is the bandwagon, get this badge, here you are in the silo. We are introducing modular learning and development. It will be up to you as members to decide on the level of learning and development you need. There will be 4 modules available for those who want to offer this, and they cover things like essential skills, which includes working with 2 people in the room and dealing with the issues that you're talking about, Peter, which as a mediator and a collaborative practitioner, of course, you may not need. So that's a module that you won't need to do, but others will. We have a module which is about an introduction to out-of-court dispute resolution approaches, because we believe that's really important, that you are able to accurately talk to any client about the range that's available, and also have some idea how you would make contact with those people in your area, or who they are, if you don't already know that. If you're a mediator or a collaborative practitioner, you may not need that either. The one area which we are really very firm about is domestic abuse and safeguarding. There is a module for that. We think everyone should do it. If you haven't done domestic abuse and safeguarding training in the last 2 years, you should do the module. And that module will be available ahead of the first Resolution Together Principles and Procedure module, which is for those who've covered all the other things, which will be available in December, as you know, and booking, I think, will open later today. So it is modular. There are a set of competencies, I hardly dare say this, to mediators in a room. It isn't like the mediation competencies, it's there as a guide. So you can look at it and think, yes, I can do that, yes, I know about that, yes, I've covered that. And it's mostly aimed at those people who not trained in mediation, collaborative, or indeed anything else, but would like to offer resolution together. So it's a bit of a tick list. Then they can look at the modules and think, right, I'm going to do all 4 of those modules, or I'm going to do 2 of 3, or 3 of 4, or whatever they need. So it's a modular approach, and the modules will be made available so that people can complete them, and eventually they will have got to do resolution together principles procedure, and they will be in a position to practice.
Angela, thank you. I think our time is up. I think in an ideal world, we'd be able to take a few more questions, but please do, if you have questions that you've not been able to ask, please do come and find us. And perhaps one final thing to say in relation to the documents. As Dave said at the start, I'm an arbitrator, and I think we're now on to something like version 10, I think, of the arbitration rules, sort of 10 years on. The documents that you'll see when you click on the QR code, I'm sure are going to evolve and change over time. And as those people who do the training, obviously we're wanting to hear their feedback, but everyone's feedback, really thoughts on the documents as they are and how they could be made better as the scheme or as the approach evolves over time. And I think that's it. So thank you very much for listening.
Marvellous. Making a very difficult topic sound very easy and straightforward. Well done. Thank you both. And we're now going to move to the keynote address. But before I do, there is no comfort break scheduled until after this session, but do feel free to get up and leave if you feel as if you need to. There'll be tea and coffee after the keynote speech. So I'm now going to turn to the keynote speech and introducing the speakers. Can I call to the stage, please, Kelly Powger and Ravi Mehe. Kelly is the founder of the bespoke law firm Powger Round Solicitors, which provides legal advice, support and assistance to families who have children who are autistic or clients who are themselves autistic. Ravi is a member of the Law Society Children Panel and advocates for children and parents in care proceedings, which has allowed Ravi to garner an enhanced understanding of neurological disorders. Kelly and Ravi both share the same mission, to raise awareness, acceptance and understanding of neurodiversity so that both professional and clients can get the best support and service in order to provide for a more inclusive society. I have become conscious over the last few years the number of clients that I deal with in relationship breakdown who either they themselves have autism or the children have autism, and it seems as if it places a considerable strain upon relationships. So please, everyone, welcome Kelly and Ravi. Thank you very much indeed.
Hi, I'm Ravi and this is Kelly. Firstly, a thank you to Resolution and the committee for giving us this opportunity, this platform. This is my first experience of speaking about neurodiversity in a public way, and I'm also formally outing myself as someone with ADHD because that's not commonly known amongst my professional network or my personal network. And so it was a really big thing for me to come today and realise that this is now going to be the start of a new almost identity for me, in that I'm not just going to be seen as a lawyer or a mum or, you know, all those other titles that I have. I'm now going to be seen as technically someone who's disabled or has a disability which impacts my day-to-day functioning. And it's taken me about 18 months to process my diagnosis. And it's been really, really hard. Hard because I didn't understand it, but I didn't know how other people would perceive me with it. I didn't know whether accounted for all the mistakes I've made and how much it contributed to the journey that I've had from childhood to now. And there was a lot of thinking going on around it. And then I had to deal with the negativity around me with it, because my biggest support network are some of my friends and family who, when I told them about the diagnosis, shrugged it off. And they said silly things like, oh, we all have those traits. We're all a little bit ADHD. Oh, I do that and I do this. And it's all in your head. And you can't have ADHD because you're really successful and you're a partner and you've got a really good client following and you've got 2 lovely children and a great husband. But that's what you see. You don't see the rest of it, all the internal chaos that I live with on a day-to-day basis, but you also don't see the impact it's had on my health. And I think I broke Kelly yesterday because when she got here, I mean, she was dishevelled already because she'd been stuck in traffic for hours, and that wasn't good for her. And then I said, oh, but Kelly, this is really important because a lot of people don't understand the stats behind neurodiversity. And one of the things that I've done a lot of reading, a lot of research, and one of the things that I learned was that if you are neurodiverse, you're likely to have your life expectancy is likely to be reduced by around 10 years. And she was just like, you've just ruined everything for me. I had all these plans and now you're telling me I'm going to live 10 years less. And this is really serious. But that's a reality of being neurodiverse. The impact it has on your day-to-day living, your relationships, your functioning at every level. There's an impact there. There's a prevalence of it in everything that we do. And it's not that it's misunderstood, it's just not known. That's how I feel about neurodiversity. And that's coming from someone who knew I was different, who I knew I had issues, I knew I had problems, and I knew that there was no way I could train my brain to do things differently. And that's what frustrated me even more, that am I really that unintelligent that I can't diarise, or that I've missed yet another parents' evening, or I forgot my son's swim bag again? And I just couldn't explain it. And one of the moments I really realised there was something wrong with me was my son was born with a medical condition, and I live in northwest London. And for the first 6 months of his life, I was traipsing to Great Ormond Street Hospital on the A40, back and forth all the time whilst he was having surgeries. And I knew that I had to pay the congestion charge. And I can tell you now that my fines were closer to £1,200 over that 6-month period, because the chronic overwhelm I had of first getting my baby to the hospital, dealing with everything that was going on, and driving, congestion charge, I've got to pay the congestion charge. I'd set a timer on my phone, pay the congestion charge, and I still forgot. I still used to forget, even though the reminders were lunging at me, but I still kept forgetting. And every time I missed it, I'd pay £80. And my husband just couldn't understand. He said, I just don't understand what's wrong with you. How are you not able to just do this one simple thing and pay the congestion charge? You know you've been to the hospital. You're doing it 2 or 3 times a week. Why do you keep forgetting? And I couldn't understand it. I just couldn't understand it. Even with all the flags and all the timers and all the reminders, I still kept forgetting. But that's a really kind of simple way of explaining ADHD in terms of how it can affect your day-to-day functioning. And it's not that I'm scatty, but I'm not scatty. My brain just works differently. And that's something that I have to try and explain to the likes of all you people now, because you may not know what neurodiversity is, or you may do, because there may be neurodivergents in the room who are suffering from dyspraxia, dyslexia, autism. But it's not a label that you wear or you can see. I mean, you wouldn't come into this knowing that Kelly and I identify as being neurodiverse and we have formal diagnoses. You can't see it, can you? But it's a disability that impacts us and everyone around us, personally, family, and in the workplace. So we've come here today with no real kind of program of how to tell you about neurodiversity, but we thought the starting point would be to tell you about our experiences in terms of how we've navigated our careers with these issues in the past. and how we're finding now that more and more people are being diagnosed later in life, and in particular women. So a lot of women are being diagnosed later in life because women are very good at masking and fitting in and changing their identities and their personalities and adapting. You know, we're very good at it. And that's now becoming more and more prevalent, that there was always an idea that conditions like autism and ADHD affected boys more than girls, but actually that's not the case. It just presents itself very differently. I think what Kelly and I have discovered, and we were talking about this last night at dinner, is we both found ways to support our behaviours, which unbeknown to us now are actually identified methods of working with people with ADHD, and one was the Hoover story. Yeah. So I from the age of about, I think, 7 or 8, I developed a very unhealthy obsession with the Hoover in the house. So my parents had a 5-bedroom house with 3 reception rooms, and I hoovered every day. So you can now, you can see how much time I spent hoovering. But it was just a joke to the family. Oh, she just loves hoovering. She'll just hoover every day. And I thought it might be OCD, and I like being clean. It wasn't. I really enjoyed the hoover. It just transcended me into a place where I could just zone out. And then I read an article last month. And we've got 3 hoovers in our house now, and it's a small house, and we've still got 3 hoovers, and they make different noises. And I still love the hoover, and I still love hoovering my mum and dad's house. And I get birthday presents. I get hoovers. My husband bought me the RoboVac for my birthday in July, and I hate it because I'm not in control of it. It just ferries around the house on its own. But my point is, I read an article last month, and the article was about brown noise. And when I pressed the app and I started listening to the brown noise, it was the Hoover noise. I'd been self-medicating with the Hoover. The brown noise was the Hoover noise. It wasn't white noise, what we used to try and get our babies to sleep when they won't go to sleep. It was brown noise. It was a different noise. So I'd been self-medicating since the age of 6 or 7 without even knowing I was doing it. And that really hit me hard. It really hit me hard because I thought, now I know why I love the Hoover so much and I can embrace it a bit more. But also it told me that my brain was telling me what was helping me tick, and I embraced it without even knowing I was doing it. I lead a team of 26 people. When I started at the firm, there was 8 under me. And when I got diagnosed, when I was doing interviews, I started telling those who I was interviewing about my diagnosis, because I realised that a lot of people will come to jobs and be too afraid to say that they're autistic or they're Asperger's or they've got dyslexia. And I now have 5 neurodivergents in my team who are formally diagnosed. 2 only told me about their conditions and then told HR after I told them about mine. And the other 3, one was diagnosed whilst working with me, and one told me about her dyslexia after being my trainee for about a year. And I picked up on it. I just thought, you're so brilliant, you're so incredibly talented, but why does it take you forever to read a document and then draft a response? And we got to the core of it. And she was diagnosed with dyslexia when she was 5. But she just couldn't tell me because she was afraid it would make me judge her or it would affect her career aspirations. Now, we're in a society now where most of this room is of my generation. I'm 20 years PQE, and we didn't go to university or school knowing about these issues. There were very few and far between. But now the next generation, Gen Z, they all know about these conditions. Teachers are trained to pick up these conditions. Parents are more aware. So the diagnosis levels are going up. And it's not that there is more ADHD out there or there is more autism. There's just more awareness. So we are going to be the mentors, and we are going to be laying the foundation for future generations. And what we need to do now is we need to embrace neurodiversity in our workplace, and we need to understand how they may work differently and how we need to invest in creating solutions for them to not have that diagnosis affect their ability to work well or feel afraid to come to work or find it too stressful. And the irony is, I think, in the legal profession and medical profession, the stats are quite high in terms of the amount of neurodivergence we have. And so and I think a lot of people have this real bizarre idea that if you're clever, you can't be neurodivergent. And I hear it all the time. You're like, no, you can't have ADHD because you're successful and you're so together. But we now know that's not the case. So when we were talking in the wellbeing lecture yesterday, one of the workshops, we were talking about how to implement wellbeing into our practice. And one of the points that I was trying to make was, it's all very well having the information on a website about well-being. This is what you should be doing, and the Law Society tells you what you should be doing, and Resolution have that information. But how do you implement it on a day-to-day basis in the workplace? And who is in control of that, and who should be taking the lead with that? And that's us. Each and every single one of us. We should be actually taking the lead with that. And it's not just taking the information and then handing it to management and saying, look, this is what we need to implement. It's going to management with the strategy that they need to put into place. So in the workshop, I've prepared a sample policy about neurodiversity in law and what all law firms should have as part of their HR policy. I drafted it myself. My HR team didn't have a clue. And simply because they didn't know where to start. So I drafted the policy and I took it to them and I said, this is your starting point. And that's what I mean about being a bit more proactive in, if you know there's a problem, let's try and address it with our managers and the partners and try and get them on board with solutions. The model, I'm just waiting for HR approval, but I'm hoping that the model can be can go into your pack so you can take it away and adapt it to whatever suits you or your firms. But it's a really good starting point. And there's a lot of information about neurodiversity and how to implement it in the workplace on government websites and organisations that support people with ADHD or autism in the workplace. But I really think that well-being and neurodiversity are really, really interlinked. And you'll find that a lot of the people who struggle with mental health, in the background, there'll be something else going on. And it's really important to kind of understand that, for me as a manager, I wasn't trained to be a manager, I'm a lawyer. So I've kind of had to learn as I go along. But for my neurodivergent team now, we have a monthly workshop and we have a 1.5-hour coffee meeting and we check in. And I can tell you every single one of them cry at that meeting. It's an hour and a half and they have a good cry because, my trainee who's autistic, she just finds everything so overwhelming, but she's just so brilliant at her job. And I think having safe spaces like that, no matter how big your firm is or small, having a safe designated space to do that monthly check-in, that time, it really helps them because they leave and they've let it all out and they feel good. And they know that I understand because I'm battling with the same as well. But you don't need to be in a position where you have to have experienced what they're experiencing. You need to just understand it and empathise and look at how you can support them at different times. So we were talking about chargeables and well-being. I've got to know all of my team on a very, very personal level. So the minute I know something's going on in their lives, I don't chase them for chargeables. I don't do anything. I give them the space because I know that that's how I need to work, and it works. So one of my team has been struggling. I went to the performance manager. We get the same as all of you. We get the monthly reports, the weekly reports, as a director telling me who's doing what in chargeables, what the charge value is, what my projections are for the year. And I just sent them an email saying, you can't chase my solicitor. She's going through a bad patch. And they didn't. They listened. Because I'm advocating for them. And so there's a lot to be done, but it can actually be done in a really easy way. So I'm going to let Kelly talk now.
It's fine.
She's going to talk to you about embracing the changes and what we need to be doing in terms of I'm talking very much about how to liaise with your staff who are neurodivergent. Kelly's going to focus on the client aspect in terms of how to deal with clients who are neurodivergent.
Oh, no, that's the workshop.
Oh, sorry.
So I'm not new to the world of neurodivergence, because just before my son, I've got 2 children, and they are without doubt my reason why. You see, I have to be, because I'm quite emotional. So my son's 14, my daughter's 12, both of them are in mainstream, and just before my son turned 6, he was diagnosed with what we were given as high-functioning autism spectrum disorder. And that was following a really difficult time for me and my family. I'm not necessarily sure that I was supported wholly in the workplace. I think those that were close to me were doing their best. But as Ravi said, it's more a case that we just don't speak about it. We know it's there, but we don't actually engage in it. We don't have candid conversations. We don't ask our clients whether they have additional needs. We don't open up that opportunity, and we need to be doing that, but we need to be doing it with each other as well. However, Ravi's been a massive inspiration to me. I didn't know Ravi until a couple of, 2 months ago, when we were chatting about what we were going to do today. But I did disclose that for several years I've suspected I may be on the spectrum, and that was a catalyst for me to have an assessment carried out. And as recent as Sunday, I received a diagnosis. When you see my son and you look at me, it's no surprising. We're peas out the same pod. But it kind of, my passion to raise autism awareness in the family justice system predates my diagnosis, and was really spurred on by the experiences that I was having in the family courts, where there was either a client who was autistic or there were children of a family who were autistic. And coming from that place of understanding, knowing how the autistic world works, for me there was a disconnect. For me there was a clear lack of understanding about what these families need, both in terms of sort of the judiciary, in terms of solicitors, in terms of other solicitors, and actually we need to come together to collaborate, to support the family as a whole. And I think what we've learnt this morning from listening to all of the speakers is that neurodivergence weaves its way through every single aspect of our job. I feel that it's almost like the darkness before the dawn, that for so many of us who are neurodivergent in the profession, we're on the cusp of a significant movement. And I hope it's for the better. But I just want to talk about the one thing that awareness, education, acceptance, understanding brings about. And I'm going to try and coordinate this. No, okay, I've just talked about embrace. Is change. And the one thing that the neurotypical brain and the neurodivergent brain has in common is that very few of us like change, or even the thought of change. Therefore, our collective response to change, or a threat of potential change, is something else that we have in common, and that is demand avoidance. And I don't know if anybody in the room has actually taken any time to look at what demand avoidance is, but I am going to read from my notes, because when I was preparing for this, I thought I'm going to see if I can find a sort of a definition of demand avoidance, and this is what I found. And it says, demand avoidance is a natural human trait, and it's something we all do to different degrees and for different reasons. It can involve not being able to do something at certain times, either for yourself or for others. It also includes the things we do in order to avoid the one thing that we really do need to do. And what kind of sprung out to me in that definition was not necessarily what we need to do for ourselves, but what we need to do for others. That actually we can justify in any way, shape, size or form that we are actually assisting and supporting our teams when in actual fact on ground level we're not. We all have examples of demand avoidance. For some, it is much more extreme than others. It can be as simple as an email that we need to send, the order we need to draft, or a difficult conversation that we need to have. But we are at a point now where neurodiversity and educating ourselves on neurodiversity is required to enable us to better support our staff, to support ourselves, to support our staff and their family dynamics. And now for clients, it's a non-negotiable. It's not acceptable that we don't have this awareness, that we're not able to create these safe places for our clients. In my professional view, understanding and accepting and educating ourselves on neurodivergence is an absolute key for the survival of the new modern law firm operating in the 21st century. And my favourite quote of all time, in the words of Henry Ford, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're probably right. But with change comes opportunity. And I think that's the key thing that we all need to latch on to. It's an opportunity to create an all-inclusive team. It's an opportunity to truly get to know ourselves and understand the needs of our colleagues, to learn something new about ourselves, to audit our environments, make reasonable adjustments to create an all-inclusive environment for our clients and staff, opportunities to play an integral part in a much-needed change in our profession, to have a more inclusive and diverse workforce, and to develop our businesses in a much more creative and sustainable way. And I was reading a book, so I'm fascinated with the brain and anything neuroscience. And I was reading a book just last night that was saying that when the wind of change blows, do we build walls of resistance or windmills? And I think for a profession, we need to build the biggest windmills. We need to start embracing neurodivergence and try and collaborate with one another to support each other. So on that note, unless you've got anything to say, I was going to make it more of a discussion at this point in terms of how we can actually go about collaborating and helping each other to create a much more diverse, to support the neurodivergent clients and staff, families.
I suppose we can start by, it'd just be helpful for me, I think, just to know if you could put your hands up, if you think you understand what neurodiversity is about, if you have experience of it and you understand, and you could happily say that you're quite familiar with the concepts behind it. If you put your hands up, please. That's about 40% of the room. 30, 40%. And I suspect a lot of you will have that knowledge because someone in the family or someone around you or yourselves have a diagnosis. Is that right? And can you put your hand up if you're managers in this room, if you manage a team? Yeah, that's a lot of you. And do you have a practice in place for people to acknowledge whether they're neurodiverse or not? Yeah, I can see a couple of hands. See, I was looking at the form that our HR use in terms of disclosing disabilities and neurodiversity. The questions went on there. There was one, autism, but there was nothing about dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD, OCD, none of that was there. One of the reasons that I came to be diagnosed is because I have suffered with chronic anxiety since I was very young. I had my first stomach ulcer when I was 21. And I've been medicated for anxiety more recently for about 3 years, 2.5 years actually, after my nephew passed from suicide at the age of 23. And then when we really began to look at it, we actually thought, actually, he might have been neurodivergent, and we just didn't pick it up because he masked himself really well. And it's in the family. I mean, my dad's clearly had, he's probably got the most extreme version of this. But he's a professional singer, and he's internationally known. And what a lot of people don't realise is that people with ADHD and autism are so creative. They're just, if they've got a hobby or a vocation, they're just, they're high flyers. And that's why it's really easy to miss. And I think when I was put on the anxiety medication, I said to my GP, I said, look, I've had anxiety all my life. I just feel like this is a constant battle. I'm not depressed, I'm just anxious. I just live with chronic anxiety, and I'm constantly thinking the worst thing's going to happen. And he just said, oh, it's, you know, it's because of your job. You're a lawyer, you do really long hours. And that's what I got for 20 years. Every time I went to the GP and said, I'm anxious, they said, it's because you're a lawyer. They put it down to my profession, which I kind of accepted. And it was only when I went off and spoke to somebody else who works in a psychiatric hospital, and she said, I think you've got ADHD. So I went and got a private diagnosis. And I felt really privileged that I could afford to do that because it cost a few £1,000s. But on the NHS, you're looking at about 2 years to get a diagnosis. But it's been life-changing for me. But my anxiety was never linked to my behaviours because my GP never gave me more than 5 minutes in his surgery. He just wanted to know what the problem was, and it was just immediately put down to, I've got a stressful life, I've got kids, I've suffered a bereavement in the family, or I've got a very stressful job and I need to cut down my hours. That was often the advice given. Well, maybe you need to think about your career. You know, is this really helpful? Do you want to carry on doing this? I see you've had problems with anxiety throughout most of your adult life. And now I don't feel anxious because I'm on the right medication and I've got the right support around me. And I know that when I forget things or I don't do things or I react to things differently, it's actually the way my brain works. And it's not because I'm, scatty or silly or there's, something inherently wrong with me. But having a diagnosis has lifted my anxiety. It's really changed me. And so just imagine how many people are probably being misdiagnosed and are taking medication or are not getting the right help because there's not enough understanding or awareness around these issues. So I just wanted to add that because I think I can tell you about my personal experiences. I can tell you I'm quite frank, and that's one of the other things you'll get with someone who's got ADHD. We're sharers, we'll tell you about our experiences. But in the profession, I didn't used to do that until recently. And it's really changed the way that I work with my colleagues, the management. I mean, I went to my CEO and told him I was stressed and, sat in his room and cried. And then he told me a story. He said he'd never shared with anyone in the 25 years he's been practicing. So I evoked that response from him and he offloaded a little bit. So it's really hard in this profession where we've got to be strong and empowered and never let our guard down to kind of really let that vulnerability be seen. It's really hard to do it in our profession because I think we're seen as being emotional or weak. And that's what I used to get as a woman sometimes when I used to complain about feeling stressed. Oh, it's because of the kids, you've got a lot going on. Yeah, there's always something that people will say, is a reason for your stress. And very often it's a culmination of all those things. But yeah, I think just knowing about it, you will be, especially with clients, you'll start impacting people because I'm a childcare practitioner, so all of my work is predominantly public law work, and it's probably 95% guardian work. And I've been working with children differently in the last few years, and in particular the last 2 years since I knew that maybe this is what's going on, because even me as a practitioner working with a young person who was autistic or ADHD or had ADHD or some kind of other neurodivergent condition, I didn't truly understand them. I didn't really know how their brain was working and what their day-to-day lives were like until I really got into it. And we're their voice. We are the people who've got to champion them and help them to access the legal system and take into consideration their needs. And I felt that I had not done a good job of it for about 17, 18 years. And I think there's a lot of people who I now talk to who feel the same way. But I think that's all I wanted to say. I'm sorry. I hadn't planned anything. I just kind of wanted to just talk to you on a very informal level about my experience. But I think we're going to take some questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you might be getting a microphone.
I'll try and speak up. I'm Graham Lyons. I'm a mediator. I also have been in analysis. I have a psychodynamic training. And I just want to ask you, when you find that a client has got ADHD or dyslexia, anxiety, autism, or whatever, what do you do? And are you able to help resolution by producing a handout to help us?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we've been talking about with the chair and other members of the diversity committee about producing more literature, because there is, I mean, we do it on a day-to-day basis with children work. You've got a lot of organisations who you can refer families to immediately as soon as they come in. I've got parents onto all sorts of courses, you know, who in public work it's a bit different because you're in the public sector, so those resources, I mean not always, but those resources are much more easier to identify, and you can kind of, especially if the local authority are exercising PR, you can badger them to make sure that those support services are in place. But with private work it's a lot harder. So I had a private client and I referred him to an organisation. And he attended a 12-week course with the mother on the other side because they were missing, whilst they were arguing and you know, trying to sort out the fallout from their separation, they were not able to support their son through it. And they actually worked with them directly on how he would be feeling as quite an autistic child from having to navigate their separation. So there are a lot of organisations, there's a lot of literature online, but I do feel that I think with resolution, putting something together would definitely help. Yeah. What I struggle with the most, more than anything as a practitioner, is more often than not, I have to tell my clients to go to their GP. And I just know that I'm sending them away to a resource that's going to fail them. And that's what hurts me the most, because there's no way to formally, there's no charity or institution that's offering free assessments. There's no such thing. And then I have to be really straight with them and say, look, you're going to go to your GP. He'll probably fob you off because most GPs actually don't know anything about neurodivergent, you know, how it affects them, because most GPs weren't educated or trained on that. And including my best friend who's a GP, who I spent about 3 hours explaining why I have a diagnosis of ADHD, and the common response, yeah, but I do that, but I do that, but I do that. And I was like, shut up, I know you do it, but I've had a formal diagnosis. I know you're a doctor and I know you're brilliant, but listen to me. So it's not, we shouldn't assume that just because someone's got a medical background that they'll understand neurodiversity, because actually it's more complex than that. There's still a controversy around neurodivergency. Is it real? Is it there? Or, you know, and there is some opposition to it as well. Yeah. Some people just don't accept it. They just don't accept that these are real disorders or conditions or whatever you want to call them. But it's definitely something that we need to navigate, because we've all talked today about how we need to look after our own well-being, and we all know that this is a vocation. You know, we're not sitting here making a lot of money. You know, if we were doing that, we'd be working in city firms. And we do it from our passion and our wants to help people. But part of that help has to be being able to signpost people and recognising if they need to be signposted.
I think as well, just the other thing, coming back to language, is be careful about the language you use, because I've experienced all different manner of languages, and most recently, you know, when talking about my son, what's wrong with him? Well, there's nothing wrong with him. He's autistic. Oh, okay. Does that mean he doesn't have good eye contact? And I think certainly with autism, and you know, I can only speak from an autistic perspective, but when you mention the word autism, people conjure up these images that are so far, you know, and I had somebody once say to me, who was a professional, who actually said to me in a conversation, is your son one of those that only eats beige food? I mean, seriously, like, it's insulting. You know, if you don't know, don't comment, or go and get educated. But these comments hurt, and I think to use things like symptoms, what are your symptoms? The intimation is it's a disease. It's not a disease, it's a neurotype. It's just the different wiring of the brain, and we have to be creative in the way that we work, because we were saying last night that our brains work against us.
All the time.
All the time. We don't live in the moment, because in the moment, our anxieties are through the roof. You know, I've sat there this morning thinking, oh my gosh, have I done that? Have I done that? Okay, what did it? I don't live in the moment, because the moment is too distressing for me on many, you know, on a lot of occasions. It's too distressing for me. So we have to find creative ways to work
to be able to suggest to clients they got in touch with the Tavistock Clinic if they needed information. I find now that they don't provide information. And I'm wondering how to start an organisation that has a compendium of experts in different areas that the public can go to. And I'm wondering whether resolution shouldn't take up that challenge. There is a hole in the market. We just don't know who to go to any longer.
I think it is, sorry.
I think I think today is the start of a process for resolution, and that's why I said that we are so grateful for this platform today, because we know that this is the start of change, and everything's got to start somewhere. And there's a lot of ideas and there's a lot of championing behind the scenes. And I think it's amazing. When I was reading the news, not last night, the night before, Dr. Alex George, does anyone know who Dr. Alex George is? He was a contestant on Love Island, and he's an A&E doctor. And then his brother committed suicide a couple of years ago, but this week he was diagnosed with ADHD. And my kids have got to the point now where wherever we go, because I'm so open about my diagnosis, and I don't know how, but it leads to everything. And they'll go, oh, Daddy, Mummy's talking about her ADHD again. She's talking to the woman in the supermarket. Can we go and get something to eat? We'll be here forever. And an example was in beginning of the July, some holidays, I went to Dorset with my family, and we went to Jane Austen's house, the museum. And I was so excited because, you know, it's so embarrassing to admit this, but I watch Pride and Prejudice, the BBC adaptation, about 4 times a week. I don't watch TV. I can't deal with the anxiety of not knowing what's going to happen in a programme that's not familiar to me. So when I need to be calmed, I watch Pride and Prejudice, and I know every single dialogue of the whole 6 episodes, and my kids do now as well, because they've been watching it since I was breastfeeding them. You know, and it's a calmer, and my husband just accepts it. We've got different rooms with different TVs, because when I'm stressed, I want to go and watch Colin Firth, and he wants to watch something else. But I've been watching that for about 17 years. I got it on DVD when it was released, and I've been watching that obsessively. So when I got to Jane Austen's house, the family, you know, they carried on walking. I was taking it all in. You know, I said, this is part of my everyday life, you know, to be here and to connect with her. And the woman said, and I said to the lady who was there, and I said, I know you're not going to understand this. I was a bit emotional. I was crying a little bit. I said, she's saved me, because she, you know, that program has saved me for years from my stress and my anxiety. And it roots me. And it's really ridiculous that a silly program roots me. And I started explaining it to her, and you know what she said to me? She said, oh, this is really interesting. And I said, it's because of my ADHD. I ended up having a conversation with her for an hour, and she cried. Her daughter was just diagnosed with ADHD, and she's a doctor. And she said, I always knew there wasn't something right about her, and I just felt like I could never put my finger on it, and I felt like I failed as a mother, because despite all the wraparound love and support I'd put in place, she still struggled, and now I know why. And then I went to Ryman's to get a wall planner, and I said to the guy, I said, no, it can't be like this, it's got to be like this, it's got to be like this, it's got to have these colours and these sections. I said, I'm really sorry, it's my ADHD. And he said, oh, I've got ADHD. And then I had a 30-minute conversation with him, but he struggled. He got booted out of school, because the school couldn't work with his ADHD. He was a young man, about 19 years old, working in Ryman's, because he just didn't have that support at school, so he left.
We were having a conversation, weren't we, about between us the amount of planners that we purchased.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you open a planner up, the page is too overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I cannot, I mean, I must have spent, I'm talking hundreds and hundreds of pounds.
And she got me to buy one.
Yeah,
Remember?
because I found one. Yeah, because I found one. I was like, this is amazing. Yeah. Because you would get these planners from Amazon or wherever, and you think brilliant, brilliant. You'd open it, be like, whoa, I can't even look at this now. And they're all sort of 2020, 2021, so I can't use them. But I've kept them as props, because I'm quite confident that one day I'll use them to demonstrate a point that it's hard. It's really hard.
think, yeah, there's a couple of questions here, and Matthew.
Can I just ask, my name's Edward Cook, and I manage a law firm myself. I'm a manager. I also have a son who is, in the last year we found out he's severely dyslexic and dyspraxic, but it took till he was 15 in a state school to diagnose that, and it's also obvious now. And I guess my question goes back to, you said in your workplace you have a number of members of your team who've got issues. You talk about your diagnosis. How do you get to that point? If you've got, if you're working with people, how did you find that out? Is that something they already knew, or did you suspect? And how did you manage that process in terms of helping those people?
So I think it became easier for me to do it once I told them that I had this diagnosis and that I'd done a lot of work and reading. And it started off as it was just a Zoom meeting, because this was all happening in COVID. And I'd see them struggling. I knew they were struggling because I was struggling. So we just started connecting, and I'd say to them, I give them the opportunity to speak to me, not as a manager. I'll say, just tell me what's going on, tell me how you're feeling, what's going on, what can I do to make it better, how can we work differently? I failed one of my best lawyers in my team, and the guilt sits with me. So she came to me as a trainee, and I'd just come back off mat leave, and this is the lady who I knew within a year or so that she was dyslexic, because everything took her forever to do. And she sat opposite me, so I picked it up, and then I asked her, I said, do you struggle with trying to read things quickly? And she kind of, she openly admitted it, and she said, I feel so much better telling you, but I was worried how, that this may sabotage my career. But what I didn't do, and this is where I failed her, once I knew she was dyslexic, I should have gone to the performance management team and said, she can't have a charge target like everyone else, because effectively she's being set up to fail. So she was the first one in the office and the last one to leave. And I should have recognised that that was a problem, and I didn't, until I started getting into how we can adapt the workplace. And now she has a reduced target of 1.5 hours, and that accommodates her disability. And that's what should have been done the minute she told me that she is dyslexic. And I acknowledged that I failed, and I apologised to her for it. And that's why I've made sure that our HR policy is that if anyone is dyslexic or dyspraxic, because of the nature of our work, it's reading and drafting and assimilating information all day, every day. So these are the kind of things that you can do to adapt your environment. Things like environment in terms of the room, lighting, pressure. I don't pressure them. They can't cope with it. They fall apart as soon as I start chasing them, so I don't chase them. But I've built up a relationship where I've said to them, I'm not going to chase you. I'm going to give you the freedom to work the way you want to. And it's actually working. And I think when you've got that trust in place and that understanding, it works. They appreciate what you do for them, and they know that you understand them. And so I've got one person in my team who does a time record all month. She can't juggle the two. She can't fee earn, deal with the clients, and then sit down and do a prep note, because there's too much going on in her head. So she time records, she sets aside 2 days at the end of each month, and she does bulk time recording, and that works for her. But we've never been taught to work like that, because if I haven't billed for 2 days or time recorded for 2 days, I'm getting an email, you haven't put anything on the system, what's going on? So I've had to change the way the culture is in our firm in terms of, you need to leave these people to be managed by someone who understands their needs. But I'm really sorry your son had that experience, because it would have affected him profoundly. And the formative years are the most important. And I know that from experience, because I was lazy, I had no focus, and I was inattentive, but I was brilliant in gymnastics and football and sports, because my hyperactivity was being catered for. And it's astonishing that I passed my GCSEs, considering how bad my hyper-focus was. Everything was done last minute. I mean, it still is, isn't it, Kelly? I think... I know, she got her slides in... on time. Probably the day after they were asked for, and Kimberly got her slides this morning at 9 o'clock from me, because I do everything last minute. But when I do it, I pull it out the bag, and that's what you need to understand. I'm not flawed, and I'm not unsuccessful with my ADHD, but I do it differently. And I get there, my clients get successful outcomes, but I do it in a different way. I'm sorry, I think we've run out. Is there time for one question? I think we've run out.
Thank you.
A few more minutes, okay, thank you.
It's really fantastic listening to both of you. My name's Adele Ballantyne, I'm a relationship therapist, and I think listening to this has stirred up a lot of thoughts for me, because one of the things I hate hearing from my clients in my practice is, well, what do you think is normal?
Yeah.
And I think what we are as a society, and we've been sort of shoehorned into thinking, is that there is a normal. And we're not, because we're human beings and we are unique. And so what I try to do in the work that I do is that I see the person who is sitting before me. So I'm not particularly interested to hear about ADHD or this, that, and the other. I want to see you and what is, you know, the issue that you're struggling with right now. And I think if we start to see the person before us, rather than having a broad one-size-fits-all. And that starts in our education system, doesn't it? And I think that's why my daughter's dyslexic. She's 28, she was 16 when she was diagnosed. And I think that, you know, she was struggling to fit into that system, which suits some children, but as we're learning now, actually it doesn't. And some of the exclusions that happen in school, you know, shouldn't happen, and we are getting to grips with that. But what I would encourage everybody to do, whether it's, you know, working in a new way as a lawyer with 2 clients in the room, is to see those 2 people. And maybe they're having conflict that is similar to another couple that you've worked with or another client you've worked with. It's not the same, because those people sitting before you aren't your other clients. They are unique. So treat them in that way, listen fully and see them. Open your eyes and really see them. Stop thinking about normal, because there is no such thing.
And I think that goes back to what was being said earlier this morning about us being cold. You know, the fact that we're being perceived as cold, because in a way, our work is quite automated in terms of the steps that we have to take. And I think we zone into that. Right, we've done that, now we need to do this. And we say to the client, you need to do that. And I think it's important to look at how we can kind of make that, channel it perhaps in a different way to make it work for the client. I'm really sorry to take another minute, but one of the questions we had yesterday in the workshops was, in terms of well-being, what can be done in the workplace? And Duncan Lewis is quite a big firm, but we are predominantly a legal aid firm, so we don't, you know, we're not cash rich. We depend on a legal aid agency for, you know, most of our money coming in. But we have started, we've got a well-being program with Health Assured, which is the biggest provider for corporate institutions. And with Health Assured, every member of our team, whether it's a support role, whether they're in the post room, whether they're on reception, they're entitled to 6 hours of face-to-face counselling every year. And that's a given. And they can access it on their portal whenever they want. And it's got nothing to do with the law firm. It's got nothing to do with HR. It's a safe space for people to talk about the stress of the work or what's happening in home life. And also that programme on the platform provides a lot of day-to-day solutions for all sorts of different areas of life. And I think it's really worth organisations, law firms looking into policies and well-being resources like that and bringing them into your firm. Because if we can afford it, you know, if you're not doing legal aid work, you can afford it. It should be part of your well-being policy. And they also then identify other resources for you if they feel that this is something that needs to be taken up. So they handhold you through it. So it's not a GP practice, it's kind of a well-being policy. But I've got the details for that, and I think I can give them to Resolution to share the name of the company and the provider. And it's a really good way to kind of introduce well-being into your workplace. And what they also do is mental health training. So next week I'll be doing a 2-day course to become a mental health provider at my law firm. And I think that if you've got more than, say, 5, 6 people in your firm, you should have a mental health provider because of the nature of the work we do, because it's so emotive, it's so challenging, we take it home with us, and it's draining, and it does, you know, it is always there. And if you've got a mental health advocate in your firm who's had the training, they'll be able to support you with that, and it's not expensive. So, you know, these resources, these tools are already out there. You've just got to kind of access them. Thank you, sorry.
Thank you, Kelly and Ravi, for the information, the insight, and the courage, quite frankly, to speak in the way that you have done about things that are so personal. I think that those in the room here will not forget this session. I understand lots of people wanted to ask additional questions or talk about their own experiences, and I'm sorry we haven't got time. But if you would like to email anything that you want to ask or anything you want to say to info@res.org, thank you, then we can ensure that it's passed on. But now we're going to break now. This is the last time we're all together, so thank you for coming and nice to see you. Thanks to all the sponsors again. We're off for tea and coffee and then on to 2 sets of workshops. So thank you all very much indeed.